So Rachel, great presentation.
Thank you.
How do you feel after it?
It was really great to speak at the BSAC conference today. It's just so lovely to sort of meet a crowd of people who are into diving, understand what the underwater world is like in the UK, and to really sort of present this campaign to them and make sure that they are aware of what the Marine Conservation Society is doing.
We understand that across the UK, many current protected areas still lack proper management. What's the first step in making sure our seas are properly cared for?
Well, the way that protection works for UK seas is kind of two-phased approach. So you have to get sites designated, but then you also have to manage them properly, like you were saying. So we need to ensure that enough of the sea is sort of designated in a proper way, so that there are lines on the map that say which sites are designated. And then after that, we need to continue to monitor and see what happens in those areas to make sure that they're properly managed. And by properly managed, we mean things like making sure that there's no damaging activities, so ensuring that the most damaging types of fishing no longer happen. That's bottom trawling, for example, as well as things like dredging for aggregates. If all of those activities are prevented from happening in the sites, then they're well managed.
The Marine Conservation Society are calling for 34 priority sites in England to be created. These sites, which still remain at risk despite being proposed for protection in 2011. Why is this, and what is the biggest risk?
So the Marine Conservation Society is calling for a further 34 sites to be designated in England alone. That's going to happen next year. So we're calling for these sites, which were initially outlined as sites that needed protection many years ago now, to actually finally get the protection they need. And that is going to happen sort of around about this time next year, that the sites will go out for consultation. At that point, we need everybody, all BSAC members, to be writing into the government and saying how important it is that these sites do become marine conservation zones. After that, there'll be a period of consultation, and then eventually sites will be designated, and we need all 34 to become marine conservation zones.
Has Brexit had an effect on that?
So next year is the last year that we'll be able to get sites designated in England. In Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, the process is slightly different, but in England, the government committed to doing 3 rounds of designation. They've already done 2, and we've got 50 marine conservation zones. So next year is the last year that we'll be able to call for more to be designated. Brexit is interesting. We really aren't sure what effect it's going to have on marine protection at the moment. We're still sort of watching to see what's going to happen. Basically, it's definitely creating a shift in priorities within the government. Obviously, they've got a lot of work to do to try and ensure that Brexit happens in the best way possible. We need to keep a watching brief to ensure that things like the EU Habitats Directive comes into UK law and isn't forgotten about as part of the Brexit negotiations.
So how do you think working with BSAC and divers will enhance your project?
Working with BSAC as part of this campaign is hugely important. Obviously, as divers, you all see the underwater world, you know what the underwater world in the UK is like, and you can tell people what we have here that desperately needs to be protected. So you are kind of our eyes of the underwater world, and we need you to ensure that all of your friends, family, people who don't know what we have here understand the importance of UK seas.
You're quite an influential person, senior campaigner at the Marine Conservation Society. What advice would you give to any young people looking to get a career in marine conservation?
Marine conservation is a really interesting area to work in. It's fascinating and it's really diverse, so it can range from sort of the science side of things to the more public side of campaigning, which is obviously what I do. I think that one of the most important things you can do is to try and get some volunteer experience somewhere working for a charity that focuses on this area, just to find out which part of the charity you want to work in. Because, for example, the skills you need to do the science side are very different to the skills that you need to do sort of the job that I do in campaigning. So getting that volunteer experience is vital to understand what it is that you're interested in. And then I would just say, go for it. If you find out, for example, that you really like campaigning and you really like to do work to influence people, then set something up in your local area that you feel passionate about. Talk to your MP, work out how change happens, and use that as a route into the charity sector to try and get the sort of job that you want.
as a keen diver, what's on your bucket list for UK diving?
There's so much that I'd love to see in the UK. Obviously, we have so many interesting species here, sharks, dolphins, turtles, that would just be amazing to see. I think Skomer Island would be on my bucket list, just because of the diverse range of wildlife that there is there. The idea that you can sort of see seals and puffins as well as sponges is really fascinating, and I can't wait to dive there.